manawa wiri, ka hura tu manawa pore, ka hura tu manawa uha. Ko tō manawa, ko tōku manawa, ko te manawa nui no rangi ka whakaputa ki te whaiao, ki te ao marama, ki tēnei punua pāho tātou. E kawe nei ngā kōrero paikea o ngā tikonohi o Whangara. Welcome to our very first Whangara Farms podcast series. And I say series number 1 because we're going to have more after this, fingers crossed. I'm your host, Hine Mihiata. Ko ngai te riwa I te hapu, ko ngā tikonohi te iwi, ko Whangara te ukaipo. And I'm excited to explore with you, our listeners, the rich tapestry of Whangara Farms, where our land and our people and our stories weave together to create a beautiful takapau for all of our future generations to come. So, we have 5 episodes as part of this series, and each of those episodes we're going to explore a key theme. Those key themes are our people, our taiao, our farm and the effect that the Cyclone Gabrielle had on our farms, diversification and what the future might hold for Whangara Farms. So, whether you are a seasoned farmer or you're a shareholder or you whakapapa to ngā tikonohi o Whangara, or you might just be somebody that's interested in what Whangara Farms is up to, I invite you to grab a cup of tea, whakarongo mai, and be inspired by the kōrero that will be shared with us by our guests. In this very special episode of Whangara Farms podcast, we're going to shine a spotlight on the actual farm itself. We'll witness firsthand through some footage that Richard has brought along with us today around the devastating impact of Cyclone Gabrielle that hit Tairāwhiti in February 2023, and we'll explore how our incredibly dedicated and resilient team navigated the challenges of Gabrielle and how they've demonstrated immense kaha and maya through the recovery efforts. For most of us, Whangara Farms isn't just a farming operation that generates income for our shareholders. We whakapapa to this land and we very much value and appreciate all of the people that work on our land. So he mihi tēnei ki a koe, Richard. E whakapau kahana kia puta te ihu o Whangara Farms. We want to give you a special shout out, Richard. 17 plus years Richard's been the GM at Whangara. So if you don't know who he is, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks. Kind words. Richard Scholefield. Been at Whangara for about 17 and a half years now. So
with your beautiful whānau?
Yes, so married Karen. So been married for about 23 years. We've got 3 kids. And most of our kids were brought up at Whangara. So Jacob was just a baby when we turned up, and he's just turned 17. So, yeah.
That's awesome. And he's gone to...
Yeah, so all our kids have gone through Gisborne Girls and Gisborne Boys. So, moved on to bigger things with the girls. In fact, Hannah's works at BDO now as an accountant.
Oh, awesome. That's cool. So they've come back. They've left the nest and come back home to Gisborne to Whangara. That's cool. And sitting next to Richard at our table today is our business manager, Ray Leach, from the whānau Leach from Whangara.
Kia ora.
You might hear a slightly different version of a Whangara accent.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm the Pākehā cousin. I work closely with Richard. I'm the business manager, so we both report through to the board, and so Richard's the custodian of all things sheep and beef, and I'm the custodian of everything else. So that's how we work really, and we do have to work at times very closely together.
Yeah, so. We've really highlighted through the podcast series that although we've now got these new subcommittees and there's diversification, at the core of our business is always going to be our farm. Diversification doesn't mean that we're going to lose any jobs or make the farm smaller. It's still very much a farming operation. Yeah. So we're very honoured to have you here today to talk to us about Whangara Farms. And on that note, can you just give us a high-level description of Whangara Farms and then what it means to you?
Cool. So Whangara Farms is about 9,500 hectares, and as you guys know, it's a partnership of your 3 Marion corporations. We have about 8,300 effective hectares, and we run sort of between 75 to 80,000 stock units. So sheep and beef, to put that, so a stock unit, to put it into numbers, probably about 60,000 sheep and about 7,000 cattle.
Perfect. I need that because I'm not a farmer. For this city slickers, we need to talk like city slicker language. But also effective land use. You said only 8,000 of that is.
Yeah, about 8,300 is effective that we farm.
Right.
Farm off. The remainder, the ineffective area, would be like the coastline. There's about there's 430 hectares that we've retired, all the coastline at Whangara. And there's areas of bush and gullies and just sort of waste areas that we can't farm. So that's how we make up that number.
Gotcha. And we did actually speak in a previous episode in Taiao around part of that being reserved for a nursery.
That's right.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. And what does Whangara Farms mean
Look,
to you?
I mean, great question. 17 and plus years, so it does mean a lot. It's a big part of my life. I guess, look, I'm just proud of Whangara Farms. I'm proud of the progress that we've made over those years, and some of the things that we've achieved.
Yeah.
So it's been cool.
Yeah, awesome. And you very much are part of that Whangara community. At the beginning of this year, few months ago, February, we were hit by Cyclone Gabrielle. I think we might have some images playing in the background here that Richard captured during that time. Can you talk to us about what it means, what it meant to face another natural disaster like this, especially after only recently also being affected by Cyclone Hail?
Yeah, look, it's pretty tough.
Yeah.
So tough sort of mentally and physically. But I guess, we had to be pretty resilient. And you also mentioned, how resilient our staff and and I think, with farming never stops. It's a 24/7 job. So you just have to carry on regardless of what nature sort of throws at you. And that's sort of pretty much what we did. But yeah, just quite tough. Probably, and I'll talk a little bit, maybe a little bit later on, just about some of those sort of, how tough it was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our whānau will be really interested in it, especially the ones that haven't actually been able to come home and physically see the effects. Yeah. So yes, let's talk about that a little bit later. But I know that people are also interested to know how different, or how did Cyclone Gabrielle compare to other events that you've witnessed in the last 17 years? I
think as a standalone weather event, Gabrielle probably wasn't. I mean, we've probably had bigger ones, bigger weather events, where more rain. And I think the reason why it had this bigger impact is because hail hit first, and then 3 weeks later then we had Gabrielle, and so hail was quite bad as well. It was really interesting, and it was sort of quite isolated in different regions. So for example, in hail, the Waimoka River flooded, and flooded the flats. Which had never been really flooded before, and Pākarai River didn't really rise up that much.
Right.
But with Gabrielle, it was the reverse. So Waimoka didn't flood at all. Pākarai went bananas. So I think it was just the two together added force. I mean, the damage is pretty significant. As you will see from some of the footage.
Yeah.
The riverbank erosion and things was pretty major. Slips and
that actually was going to be my next question. Was, can you talk to us about the damage to the land? Yeah.
Look, I mean, we lost about 100 hectares of flats under silt. So silt is just what's left behind when it floods. And it's deposits from way back up in the back country. It came down the river when it flooded, and when the water left, it just leaves the silt. So of that, we'll get 50 hectares back, but 50 hectares we won't get back. So 50 hectares has 1.5 metres of silt on it.
What even happens?
Well, it's quite dangerous. You can't really drive on it. Basically, you can't see any fences. It's just silt. So it's
it came up above the fences.
Yeah, so the silt's above the fence. So we'll just leave that land, and over time, maybe you might be able to go back there. But it's pretty much just a no-go area now, which is quite sad. I guess, really, other damage, riverbank damage is pretty severe.
And I think we've got some drone footage of the bank that actually broke, right? Yeah,
and just completely devastated the riverbanks, which is really sad. So a lot of fencing damage, a lot of slips. We had a real big major slip a week after the cyclone. So what actually happens with land gets saturated with water, and the water will sort of hold it there, and it will sort of semi-holds it together, and sometimes as it dries, that water starts to drain away, and then that land starts letting go, And so we probably had about a 20 hectare, which is nearly 50 acre slip come down on the Pākara side that it basically blocked the whole Pākara River.
Wow.
So that's, so it was ongoing. And I guess one of the big challenges is it just doesn't want to stop rain.
Yes,
So
and we're going into winter.
Yeah, and we're getting a lot of rain. The last 3 days we've had a serious amount of rain out there, and it's wet again. So it is quite concerning moving forward. But I mean, I guess, fences, culverts, just all sorts of infrastructure on the land. Issues with water systems we're still trying to fix. And just a few stock losses, but not too bad, a couple of hundred. So in the size of our business, that's not too bad. So, but challenging.
Yeah, I absolutely. And I mean, it was actually in February, I was home because we were training for the matatini, and I got stuck here when the cyclone hit, and I was scared and nervous and anxious, and I only had to worry about my own whānau, let alone how many 100,000 stock that we had to look after. So I'm sure that our listeners will be interested to know and understand the impact that the cyclone and that this event has had on not only you but your family and our staff.
Yeah, look, I think I think over the last 12 months probably been the most challenging of my farming career. So mentally sort of challenging. It's just you keep getting hit with things constantly, and so I think had to dig deep. Personally dug pretty deep and just kept going. And I think you sort of had to do that for the staff. Look, the staff were awesome. They really were, really resilient. And whilst there's no way I can get around everywhere, I mean the guys were great. We had staff that were isolated, for
and no cell phone,
no cell phone, no contact at all. For quite a large period of time, there were guys that were isolated for 2 to 3 weeks with the road, so at Tongataha.
Yes.
But just really great, awesome, resilient guys and staff, and so without them, we could never have ever got through. I guess, I suppose my family probably didn't really suffer, to be fair, other than not seeing me. So I think that's probably and I guess if I had my wife sitting in here, she'd probably say something different. But but I was 24/7, not out doing and it was important to be there side by side with the guys and support them. And I think that's what I had to be doing, and also just problem solving. Yeah. Because sometimes when a whole lot of stuff hits you all the time, you just sort of you can get overwhelmed with it. Yeah. And it's important to just focus on the important things.
It must be quite scary in bed at night when you don't know what's happening, and then you get up in the morning. I remember talking to you and saying, what's it look like now, because until the dawn comes, that's one thing I learned, until the dawn comes, they can't know what's happened.
Sleepless nights. Sleepless nights. I mean, when you hear the rain on the roof, and it's just the force of that rain, and you just know what's happening, because you get to feel, especially after hail, and we knew that we're getting a lot of rain, and I'm on the top of a hill, and when my lawn's flooding, you know that there's things things happening. So I guess a few sleepless nights, but you just got to get on with it, That's pretty much.
And stay solution focused.
Yeah, very much so. I think. Talked about the resilience. I think it was important for me anyway, personally, to have quite a strong support network that's, just people that I know throughout the industry and throughout the country. So it was good to actually lean on them a little bit. So that's how I sort of got through mentally, I guess.
And I want to thank you for being so open around mental well-being, because I know that it's a tricky conversation to have, but unless we have them in these kind of forums, then other people don't know what the struggle is like. We think, farming, it's physicality, but actually the mental drainage, and especially during these times, is massive. So thank you for sharing that with us, and I know that you've been an incredible role model for your team too. We heard that from them when we met with them. And just to kind of wrap up that space, what would you say was the biggest challenge during that time?
I suppose once communication and making sure everyone's safe. I think that was and I mean we have things in place with our radios. And so that proved invaluable. Even though there were no phones, no cell phones, no internet, we could still have our two-way radios working.
Yeah, so you had that already set up.
Yeah, so we could talk to people, so that was cool. There was just one guy, a couple that down at Pānui that we couldn't get a hold of. So other than that, that was great. I guess challenge is probably more so once everything sort of settled down and we tried to get into recovery mode. So that's probably been the biggest challenge. So things like getting contractors with big machinery, because they were just soaked up by the roading and so they just couldn't find them. That was a challenge. It's just getting fences back intact, getting livestock under control. So just with slips, sheep a little bit dumb. So if someone tells you that sheep are dumb, they are dumb. So if sheep will look at a slip and just go and walk into the middle of the slip and get stuck,
Because I was going to ask, how were the actual livestock during this whole period?
Generally, the stock were pretty good. We had a few losses, so sort of, crook, sort of sick animals. We lost quite a few ewes in a slip, so they walked into a slip and must have got the slip came down on top of it. Just silly stuff like that with sheep. So it's just getting the control of stock. So that has been a bit of a challenge.
You told a great story about kidnapping that digger driver.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell that story? Because that's cool.
Well, kidnapping his digger and
that's a great story.
So there was a guy who had his digger. So just we were really frustrated because we couldn't get big machinery, and he had a little digger anyway. And anyway, he had it getting serviced, and we managed to, through John on Pānui, he managed to get a hold of him, and he was in between jobs, happened to be, but he had lots of people sort of coming up and asking him, can he come and do some work? But we managed to grab him, which was pretty great. He only had a little 8-ton digger, but he managed to open up all Pākarae and get some access and did it. It was great to starting to get stuff done. We have since got another bigger digger on site, 13-ton digger, but...
Have you let him go home now?
Yeah, we let him go.
And does the farm, do you then have to contract those people in to use that machinery? Or
they bring their machinery, and they're a driver as well.
And they're drivers, right.
But I guess the biggest challenge for us is it won't stop raining.
Yes.
So seriously, in the last 18 months, it just rains. It's just constantly raining. It's just something that's quite unbelievable. And so you can get a big machine there and start doing some work, but if it keeps raining, all you're doing is making mud.
Yeah.
And so we've had to pull the pin. We got open as much as we possibly could on Pākarae, and then we just had to send them home because you just end up making too much mess. And then all the work you've done just gets washed away, or more slips come down, and then you're back to square one.
And the costs just start accumulating and building and building and building. And one of the questions I have here, it's a bit cheeky, but I think that our listeners will be genuinely interested in knowing, what do you think the associated costs?
Yeah, I did the first sort of guesstimations around cost, about $500,000 and I'd sort of stick to that. I think maybe a little bit more. It depends if you're wanting to actually get back land. So if you've got silt, land under silt, it'll cost you probably, they reckon $30,000 to $40,000 a hectare to clear that. So
and you've got how much under silt?
Well, there's 50. So you don't want to be doing that. So that's why it's not. So you're not going to do that. So I haven't included those sort of costs in. So it's more just to get out, basically the damage to fences, culverts, water systems, get regrassing land, so the land that we didn't have to put back into, and just those sorts of costs. I think around about $500,000, which, for the size of our business, it's a big number, but it's not. It's something we can handle. We're lucky. I feel sorry for smaller farms that may have lost a larger amount of land and just don't have the sort of capacity.
There's also the cost of losing that productive land, that productive 50 hectares, for years.
Yeah, so it's gone, and then having to rejig some policies. So, for example, at Rotatahi, we're not going to mate our ewe hoggets this year just because we haven't got that extra 50 hectares, and it's going to put a little bit of pressure on it. And I'm not wanting to have any pressure in the system. The guys are under enough pressure, so try and depressurise things and readjust some of our policies. So, sort of doing stuff like that. So, that all factors in. I'd say, but yeah, up front, sort of $500,000 and. Maybe might creep up a little bit higher too.
Yeah, I was going to stay in funding, like financial questions, but when I heard you say policies, I've actually made me trigger a little thought or question around wellbeing policies. Do we have anything in place for our farmers in terms of support?
As a country?
No.
At
Whangara Farms?
Yeah, maybe not. We probably don't. I think I'm very mindful of it. It's something that I'm mindful of, and I think always big. And we have the guys. We have had some training around, well, not so much training, but just sort of a seminar around dealing with mental health and how you actually deal with things. And I think it's something that I'm going to be doing with the staff more.
Great.
And I think that's something we can definitely do, and it's not doesn't cost much, and it'll give guys different tools to handle stress, because it's actually stress. It's stress related, and it's how you handle that stress. And we do have some real sort of quite tough East Coasty sort of males.
They might not want to do
Well,
it.
we're all tough. Farmers are notorious people for just working. You know, if I would just work harder, I'll get there. I'll achieve, or I'll feel better. But the reality is, if it's a lot of stuff is, you just can't get ahead. You know, a big weather event like this, you can work as hard as you like, but you're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So you're better to do little pieces. So just focus on this little piece here and get this done. And there was a little thing when you drive down into Pākarae, there was a fence that you drive past. You go over the Pākarae Bridge and there was a fence there, and it was just annihilated. And he used to drive in there, and the first thing he looked at was the fence, and he'd see the silt, and it was just, anyway, Adrian and the boys got in there, and they cleared off that fence, and they just renewed it. And I drove in there, and it was just, looked and saw the fence, wow, brand new fence, you know. Yeah. And it's just, as I said, I said to him, it's just the little things, just the little things you can actually, I've achieved that.
I mean, for me, I've got a question. I mean, the riverbank devastation, when I went down to Pākarae, and the yards had gone, the track had gone, it had gone like 50 metres, maybe more, from the riverbank. So how the hell do you work out, moving forward, where the fencing should be and the riparian planting? How far out do we need to go now?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. So some of the things we've got to consider, some of the mitigations, and I don't know. I don't know the answer. Yeah. I tell you what, I never thought that river would take as much of that bank as what it's taken.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But there's a limit to what you can do. So I think you've got to put a line in the sand and say that, that this might be a 100-year event. I don't know.
We had like 200 or 300-year events in a month, eh?
Yeah.
And I think the government has stepped in, I understand, in terms of funding.
Yeah.
And so, and Ray, I know that you've been working hard in terms of seeking out funding opportunities. What kind of government support or funding were you able to get for Whangara Farms?
Well, initially MPI released the Cyclone Gabrielle relief fund.
That's right, yeah.
And that was for $10,000 for farmers, for sheep and beef farmers. That was for $10,000 per block. So we were able to secure, because we also lease blocks as well, so we applied on behalf of the lease. So we were able to secure just over $100,000 there. But, in the scheme of things, $100,000, $110,000, when you've got $500,000 to $600,000 worth of damage, it's a spot, really. So, but we did, Richard had enough to do. So, I'm in the funding space, for our other projects. So it was the right thing to do for it to fall to me, and we were successful in that. And we've found other funds now to help us with this, because they were quite specific that it had to be fencing and water systems, and for the security of livestock. So there was no sediment removal, none of that. That's just coming out now through other funds. Right. So we're going after that now, because, as I didn't know the costs on removing a hectare of silt at that cost. No fund's going to cover that. Yeah. But there is a fund there now for sediment removal, and so we need to get our share of that, as do all the other farmers as well.
Yeah. So we had a great relationship with insurance companies, so Farmers Mutual. So So I've been working with them as well, and so we've managed to get about $240,000 worth of insurance claims, both from hail and Gabrielle. So when you start adding it up, we've managed to get a little bit, and I think we're actually pretty lucky, lucky as a business that. We did have. It's not lucky having insurance policies. That's just common sense. So, but I think it was great that they worked with us, and we looked at some of the damage from hail and the damage from Gabrielle, and looked at all our policies and went through and that they were really good.
Yeah, that's cool. And I know that we've got an incredible team, and we might have some funding from the government, and this might be a really tricky question, but how long do you think it will really take to recover specifically from Cyclone Gabrielle?
Look, yeah, it's a real hard question.
I know.
I would say, look, a full recovery where you can be back to where you were, but you're never going to re-establish those creek banks. So just you got to realise that those river banks they're going to be scarred like that forever.
Yeah.
Full recovery, maybe 5 to 10 years. So full recovery back to the way things were, and maybe getting back the 50 hectares.
Well, is that what we want to do? Do we want to go back to what we were doing before, or is there opportunity for?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's some areas that potentially we may need to consider that we might not want to continue farming. But I think we already were in that situation where we're looking at those areas.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Pākārai, just the damage and the slips and some of that country is pretty marginal. So there's definitely areas there that we had already identified as potentially areas that we needed to maybe stop farming on.
Yeah.
And look at, planting native trees or whatever it may be. I think in the short term we're back up on our feet and we're back running and we've got the farm carries on, and that's the other thing. Farming never stops.
Yes. My mum's side of the whānau are farmers.
Yeah.
24/7, 7 days a week.
And it just never stops. So it's like you never have a rest from it. And so I think the thing is that's the farmer's back on his feet, and we were loading it and killing lambs and the week after. So we were back into it. We're digging out the loading ramp so that we could get cattle onto the truck to go. And so it's just back into it. And I think, so I would think in 1 to 2 years we're sort of back up to where where we were. But there's just to be a full recovery is just going to be a long time.
Yeah.
What made it real for me was Phil and Richard will try and text him in the morning, and I'm eating my cornflakes and I'm sitting in my kitchen and he's sending me this footage of what he's looking at. And I'm going, people just don't get this. I was worried about a tree in my garden going over my neighbours. I mean, please, So for me it was, look what these guys and girls are dealing with.
Yeah.
I was blown away because I saw it. I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
The bridge is going to go next. What's going to happen there?
Yeah.
What kind of, you're absolutely right, Ray, and in the future, what could we be doing to safeguard or future-proof the farm from future events like this?
And
so that we don't have to get these calls, these drone footage of,
But I think, it'd be great to be able to come up with, for me to sit here and say, right, we need to do this.
Yeah.
And I'd love to do that.
You
I'd love to set out a plan.
if you could.
I'd love to set out a roadmap to mitigate it. I think the weather's so unpredictable. So I think maybe all I can think of really is probably things like looking at our land use and maybe saying, well, hey, some of those areas we shouldn't really be farming, and look, and that will maybe mitigate some stock losses. The land's still going to slip, so it's still going to go. The rivers are still going to rise up. We talked about setbacks. Do you have further setbacks? But I mean, how far do you keep going? I think we still need to move on, but we need to seriously consider things like how close our fences are to the rivers and things like that. But at the end of the day, you still need to actually farm, and unfortunately, a lot of that area, especially on B5, for example, where we're fencing all those waterways now, that's our best land. So that's the land that's worth megabucks, and that's our best growing land. And so what are you going to bring the fence way back and you're going to just leave it? You're sort of not going to do that. So it's a balancing act. Get a balance between sort of common sense, maybe a little bit of mitigation of risk, but at the end of the day, you still actually need to carry on as a business.
Yeah. Boom. Mic drop. Absolutely, we do. We absolutely do. And I think our time has kind of come up now, but I really want to thank both of you for joining us, and Richard for providing these incredible images that I think our whānau will now very much get a better understanding of what the farm and our farmers have been through since Cyclone Hail. And I think, whānau, you got some top tips out of this esteemed farmer today. I heard, make sure you have good insurance. I heard, make sure you have well-being as a top priority. My last one was, wouldn't be able to do it without an incredibly resilient kaha maya team, and supporting yourself with people that you know that you can lean on and rely on, especially during these times. To wrap it up, is there any thanks or any last words that you'd like to add?
No, look, just thanks for the opportunity to come in and have a yarn and talk about it. I think it's really great that there's an opportunity to sort of show more shareholders and more people more about Whangara Farms. So, really appreciate the opportunity.
Cool. Thank you, Richard. Ray?
Oh, he's doing a great job, what can I say?
Oh, well, tēnā korua, thank you very much for making time. I know you're a very busy man, Richard, and both you, Ray, so tēnā korua. Tēnā tātou.